enroll over 700 women from throughout the state and country. Workshops will focus on business growth, financing, and technology. Hands-on demonstrations and corporate representatives will be available in the Office of the Future. All events are open to the public. For information, call 908-560-9607.
Hello, I'm Sam Rosenfarb. Welcome to the White Collar Crime Report. Our topic tonight, how to commit fraud and get away with it. To discuss this topic, I have Alfred Ferguson, senior litigator from McCarter & English, the largest law firm in New Jersey, and Edmund Pankow, chairman of Intertech Inc., an international financial investigative agency located in Houston, Texas. Alfred, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Sam, I've been a lawyer for about 30 years. And as you well know, lawyers deal in fraud every day. We advise people who have committed fraud. We advise people who have fraud committed against them. So after 30 years, it's almost become second nature to look for it.
Fraud seems to be a hot topic today. Ed, tell us a little bit about your firm.
Well, I started this business 20 years ago as a one-man agency after leaving the government as a federal agent. And it was the first business private investigation agency in the country. And because of the need for white-collar crime investigation, it grew from 1 to 2 to 5 to 10 to 20 to 50 people. And today we do work all over the world.
Terrific. What's one of your most fascinating cases?
Probably has to be the Manuel Noriega case. We did a lot of asset searching and located millions of dollars worth of property and assets all over the world.
How'd you accomplish that?
Well, we had a little bit of luck, and we bagged Manuel Noriega's computers during the invasion. And our investigators came into possession of his actual computer disks and printouts that showed where these properties and assets were.
Oh, so you did it by high tech. I read your book. Check it out. Terrific book telling you how to find assets, how to locate hidden dollars. I just want to read a short excerpt. It says, I just happened to be in Panama during the 1989 invasion, sitting in a bar when parachutes blossomed all over. Is that how did you get to Panama?
Well,
I just happened to be in Panama.
I was in Panama on another investigation. I was investigating one of the savings and loan cases for the government. And I was working for regulators trying to find money that an insurance company fraud had deposited in Panama with Manuel Noriega. They wanted to set up a phony reinsurance company in Panama, and I was tracing that money when the invasion actually took place.
Very interesting. Now, did you get involved in any insurance frauds? Any other? What is your most interesting case?
Oh, I don't know if I have one most interesting like the General Noriega case, but
that's a fascinating case.
We have lots of littler cases where you find assets, you try and find assets. One of the real problems for lawyers, and as you know for CPAs too, is the responsibilities that a lawyer has when you uncover fraud. And a great deal of attention is being paid to that now by the organized bar, because it's difficult when you're representing somebody who comes in and says, I've committed a fraud, what do I do, how do you help me? You have to be very, very careful about what you can disclose, who to, how you get involved with the authorities, and what you can do. It's a very, very dicey situation.
You know, as a forensic accountant, I've been involved in a number of divorces where husbands, or wives today more so than in the past, have squirreled away assets or hidden assets. And our job is to find out what is the company really worth, or how much money does he really earn. I find a lot of newly divorced, newly separated people who own businesses suffer from the disease of RAIDS, R-A-I-D-S, recently acquired income deficiency. Do you find that? Do you find they start hiding assets?
I'd say 50% of the family law work we do, you have assets either hidden away or undervalued or income streams diverted someplace else.
And as an investigator, how do you find that?
Well, there's a number of ways, and most of it's through the paper trail. One of the best ways is to get the oldest financial statement they prepared, one they made back 10 years ago when they needed to borrow money, and compare it to the new financial statement they've made today. And you look what was on the old one and what's not on the new one, and trace it to see where
You
it's
have an
gone.
accounting degree, so you have the wherewithal to do that. Is that required for all the people who work in your agency?
No, the accounting degree helps because you can't investigate white-collar crime or do business investigation unless you understand business. I found it's much easier to take an auditor or an accountant and make them an investigator than to take an investigator and make them an accountant.
Right.
But
That sounds right to me, too.
Yeah. Well, in this business, there's certain tricks, like 9 out of 10 people that hide money hide it in their spouse's maiden name. So being in the business and doing this every day, we have red flags, we have procedures that we look for because various people commit them time after time after time.
Do you think the downturn in the economy is causing an increase in white-collar crime?
I tend to think not, simply because the people who do the most white-collar crime are the least affected by a downturn in the economy. On the theory that the economic downturn affects the lower income levels of society, and the people who are doing the white-collar crime are generally in the upper income levels.
Ed, you've been involved in so many fascinating cases. Tell us a little bit about the case that I read, individual hiding dollar bills in his scuba diving gear.
Well, we had a case once where we were investigating an accountant, and this accountant...
Now, accountants don't commit crimes.
Never. Well, this accountant, the first weekend of every month, went to the Cayman Islands. And when he went there, he always brought his scuba tanks. Now, number one, the pattern of going there every time was something that you'd wonder about because divers don't go to the same place every time. They always want to see some new rocks and some new fish. Other than that, a real diver never takes his own scuba tanks because they could explode, they're heavy, you rent them. So after this person had done this 7 or 8 times, we found that there was a pattern there, and we had the U.S. Customs people open those tanks. And inside we found 13 envelopes of money. One said Dr. Smith, one said Dennis this, lawyer Bob.
It's a hell of an underwater cachet he had there.
Well, he'd opened a number of accounts for people down there, and we made him an offer he couldn't refuse, that he could become a witness or a co-defendant.
Well, I guess he chose the right choice, I guess.
That did work out that way.
People have the impression that white-collar crime and criminals aren't prosecuted to the extent of violent crimes and criminals. What's your opinion about that, Al?
When the prosecutors get a hold of them, they do, absolutely. And indeed, I think there's been a much increased emphasis on prosecution of white-collar fraud and crime. Certainly in New Jersey today, with the recent investigations about the bus stings, for instance, where the prosecutors set up a phony bus accident. They had 9 investigators sitting in the bus as passengers. They faked an accident,
right.
And then all of a sudden 14 people showed up from the streets, got in the bus and filed claims on the accident.
More insurance fraud. People are just falling all over themselves to get in on the act.
But there's a reason why. I mean, New Jersey has a very strong insurance fraud section now in the Attorney General's office, and there's a reason for that, and that is that everybody is paying attention to the insurance premiums we pay for our auto insurance, as well as health and the other kinds of insurance. And unfortunately, New Jersey has a reputation for having a large segment of its population ready to commit fraud at the drop of a hat.
Do you think that's endemic to New Jersey?
Well, it's not really endemic to New Jersey. What I see and what I'm afraid of is what happened in our banks and savings and loans is going to happen even worse in the insurance industry. That we're going to have insurance company failures because of these claims and because of the growing issues of fraud, and we're going to lose more money in this country through insurance fraud and through insurance company failures than we ever did in our
I know that
banks.
people think nothing of ripping off their insurance companies. If they have the trunk of their car broken into, all of a sudden they claim they've had VCRs, cameras, stereo equipment in their trunks because they figure the insurance companies are going to pay for it. The cost to society, though, for this white-collar crime is huge, isn't it?
Absolutely huge.
Yeah. Is it, in comparison, do you think there's a greater harm to society from white-collar crime as compared to violent crime? You know, we live in a violent world.
Well,
Sam, that's a tough question to answer. You're talking about your physical safety when you go out on the street versus the safety of your bank account.
yeah.
Now, you can answer that question better than I can.
Well, as a CPA, I hold my bank account very dearly,
But
but I also hold my life dearly as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is your life worth? But the damage to the American public is far greater from white-collar crime, because that's the reason that many people are out of a job. That's the reason that many of our programs aren't working, because fraud costs as much as 10 cents of every dollar in many areas. So someone with a gun and a knife may do a robbery for $500, but someone with a pen and a computer may get $500 million.
Well, I read something you wrote about how the bank teller who steals $5,000 may get 2 or 3 years in jail if she steals it from a bank she's employed with, whereas the bank president who steals $5 million, he may get much less than that. Do you think that the wealthier the criminal, the more the difference in representation makes in his incarceration or in his conviction? Do you think that having that additional dollars, being able to employ or engage a higher priced attorney makes a difference?
Absolutely.
It does.
Sure.
How do we change that? How do we change that system, or should we change it?
Well, through asset forfeiture programs, which the government now has, in many cases they can seize the fruits of the crime, the money, up front. If that happens, then they can't use that money for defense, as they often did in the past.
I see. They've been using the funds that they accumulated wrongfully.
On the other hand, let me tell you about the Newport cases here in New Jersey and New York, where the federal government, the SEC, came in and used the RICO, the asset forfeiture, to seize, in effect, an entire brokerage firm. They then had the trial, and of course the defendants were acquitted by the jury, found not guilty. But the damage had been done, and the government had already seized and put the brokerage firm out of business.
I mean, they seized the assets before there was a conviction?
Yes, under the new law, they can do that.
At the same time as the indictment, they seized the assets.
All assets that they could find?
And indeed, the Justice Department in San Francisco just moved and seized a law firm of a highly well-known lawyer who did a lot of white-collar criminal defense work, and it was alleged that he had furthered a drug conspiracy, so they seized his law firm.
But it sounds un-American to me. You're guilty before proven guilty.
Many people agree with you, Sam, and a lot of criminal defense lawyers are very, very upset.
Well, I'd like to talk more about that after we get back from this break. We're just going to have a short break. We'll be back with White Collar Crime Report, Alfred Ferguson from McCarter and English, Edmund Pankow from Intertext Agency, Houston, Texas.
You don't have to embarrass a friend to keep her from drinking and driving. You could just explain things to her.
It's 6:45 and our party's at 9 and I still got shopping to do. But if you drive, you'll have to drop me off and pick me up, and then I'll be late and you won't be ready. So I'm going to drive and drop you off, and then we're going to do all the things I need to do, and I'll be back in time to help you set things up. Okay? All right.
Take the keys, call a cab, take a stand. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
What is a man? A man stands up for himself. A man looks you in the eye. A man shares his strength. A man protects his child. If you're a man with a woman who's pregnant, help her get the care she needs now. Because if you don't, for help, just call.
Welcome back. This is Sam Rosenthal for White Collar Crime Report. I have with me Alfred Ferguson, senior litigator for McCarter and English, largest law firm in New Jersey, and Ed Pankow, investigator for Intertext Agency in Houston, Texas. Gentlemen, before the break, we were talking about the seizure law, which to me sounds fascinating, where the government, merely on an indictment, can take assets from a defendant who hasn't been convicted. Tell me a little bit about that. I'm fascinated by it.
It's called RICO, which is Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations. And if you make the proper allegations, the government has the right to come in and seize the assets or the fruits of the crime. And the defendant, the accused, can't use them, either to pay legal fees or do anything else with them.
But what happened to innocent until proven guilty?
A thing of the past, at least in RICO investigations. Because the damage, technically you're not guilty, but your assets and your business is liable to be shut down. Indeed, the threat of that is a formidable weapon, and the government can obtain quick settlements and quick pleas by using the RICO indictment and threatening seizure as a total obliterating attack before the event.
Is this threat because of the tremendous increase in white-collar crime and corruption? What do you think, Ed?
Well, the real reason for it is that in so many cases, by the time they got a conviction, the money was moved offshore in the Isle of Man and Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, and the government...
But then we can employ guys like you to go and find it. That's what you do for a living, right?
It's then moved into 50 different places, and often it's spent, that the people will go on a drunken orgy of spending because they know they're going to go to jail.
I see. So the government seizes it up front.
Exactly.
Do they get convictions in a lot of cases?
Well, Sam, look, let's take another look at this. The government threatened to file a RICO indictment against a law firm in New York. Now, the assets of the law firm weren't going anyplace. The assets of a law firm are all the lawyers working,
right,
and work in progress. So it was a naked power play to threaten the firm to plead guilty and pay a fine, or else they'd shut him down.
Boy, what a Damocles sword, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. That's what it is. It's one of the government's most potent tools, but it's particularly effective in drug cases and in cases where great amounts of money have been taken as the fruits of a crime.
Talking about great amounts of money, this Michael Milken case, there are very few people who really understand what he did wrong, how he manipulated the junk bond market, but they know it had to do with a lot of money. Any opinions on that case? Michael Milken and his millions?
Michael Milken doesn't think he did anything wrong, flat out, and there are many, many who agree that he did not do anything wrong.
What was he accused of?
Well, he was accused of manipulating the bond market.
And he was convicted. He not only was accused, he was convicted.
He was convicted of that and of making something like $600 million through this manipulation and conspiracy with others, that they planned to create this whole junk market bank failure, that they knew up front that what they were doing was not a viable business deal.
And what's the harm to society?
Oh, well, wait a minute, I got to disagree with that. In the first place, I'm not speaking for Mike Milken, and I don't represent him, and I'm not an SEC securities lawyer, but he wasn't convicted, he pled guilty. He was not, he never had to go to trial. And the reason that they let him plead was that they had a hard time, they had real doubts about whether they could prove their case, because he had very good lawyers, and Mike Milken was an incredible success story. Now, he did not conspire to create the bank failures and the junk bond debacle. He did
Is there an allegation that part of what he did?
Well, the indictment was, 6 inches thick, so I'm not quite sure. I don't want to take the time to detail everything at the
How about Leona Helmsley? That made tremendous headlines.
Well, Leona Helmsley was guilty of being rich, and she made a few bad statements, and somebody picked her up on it. But I just point out to you, Sam, that I think 3 consecutive nominees for Attorney General of the United States couldn't take the job because they hadn't paid their taxes.
That's true.
Now, Leona Helmsley didn't pay her taxes, but they're in a much more obvious and flagrant way. But the principle isn't all that much different, is it?
No, it doesn't seem to be. Do you have any cases that you think we might be interested in? Because I know as a litigator for McCarter and English, you must come across some fascinating stories.
You come across a lot of interesting things as you go through all those litigated matters, but we had an investment banker who was dealing in millions of dollars, and yet he took the time to take $200,000 and get it over to Switzerland, put it in the account, and then when he'd go there with his girlfriend, he'd just go in and write a check for cash and take $20,000 or $30,000 out and go spend it and have a good time.
That sounds like fun.
Well, it was
How did he
great
manage
fun.
to do that? How did he steal the $200,000?
Well, he didn't. He was his own money. He just took it, but he was trying to keep it away from his wife.
I see. And guys like Ed Pankow, they find those kinds of money with their resources that are provided, and check it out.
Well,
tell me, how would you find this in Switzerland?
In quite a few different ways. Whatever you do, wherever you go, you leave a paper trail. When you travel, that goes into computers of the airline reporting service. When you stay in a hotel, you leave a trail from the phone numbers that you leave and the people you call. Everything you do today, if you buy traveler's checks, on the backs of them we can tell you where you cash them. You literally can go nowhere and do nothing without leaving some trail, and a real good investigator today makes his living following that paper trail. What they do is try to recreate your past and see where you went from point A to point B and what you did in there.
Wow.
If you rented a car and you drove 66 miles from Bern, Switzerland, I know within a radius of 33 miles you did something and you went to some bank or did something there.
In your practice.
Disgruntled employees, Sam.
Disgruntled employees.
Disgruntled employees. There's nobody you can go through life without offending at some point or other. And if you've done something wrong and they know about it, they're going to blow the whistle.
So there's always an informant. I read somewhere where 80% of white-collar crime is uncovered through informants.
Well, Leona Helmsley got the whistle blown on her by people who worked on her estate. And they knew what she was doing, and they blew the whistle.
Yeah. One of the best tools of an investigator is to go into the courthouse and see who hates you, who has sued you before. We call that sniffing out the vintage where the sour grapes are stored.
Right.
And no one knows you more than someone that hates you. If someone likes you, they'll tell 3 people. If they hate you, they'll tell 100. So, you know, these are the people that are the ones that give the information, that make these big investigations.
You told me a little story during the break about a Ponzi scheme. Can you elaborate on that? That's an interesting story as well.
Well, Ponzi was an Italian immigrant that did multi-million-dollar frauds in New York and in New England years ago, but his scheme was to take your money and give it back to you in pieces so you think you're making interest.
Give you back your own money.
Your own money. And today we have a scheme that's just been uncovered in Houston of a woman that took in at least $30 million from investors, people that thought they were getting 10% a month interest. And what they were just getting is part of their own money, and she kept on taking in new money, so more and more was there.
$30 million, you would think at some point she'd have enough.
Well, it's hard to say. The more you have, the more you want. And I understand that she had a collection of hundreds and hundreds of these Judith Leder purses, which are thousands of dollars each. And in shopping, she made Imelda Marcus look like a piker.
Do you think it's just greed? Is that what fuels this need to keep stealing?
It's greed, excitement, and the habit of doing it, Sam.
It's the habit of doing it.
Very, very wealthy people often go on committing petty fraud, not because it's going to give them more money in their pocket, but because it's fun to get away with it. And there's a certain excitement of living on the edge. You can either jump off cliffs and go adventure skiing or scuba diving, or you can get money any way you can. I mean, there's a certain thrill associated with being a success at being fraudulent,
Success at being a fraud.
Right. And I think this operates in a lot of cases. What about you, Ed?
Exactly, that these people get an adrenaline high, a rush. It's their way of winning. It's their way of keeping score. And as my good friend Joe Wells once said, there's no such thing as a small fraud. There's only a big fraud that hasn't grown up yet.
What is white-collar crime? What do you think of as white-collar crime? What's the definition?
Sam, let me put in perspective. 40 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of white-collar crime because the regulation of what white-collar people did was not very advanced. Mm-hmm. The incredible growth in regulation has led to a dramatic increase in illegal activities. The person who now drops oil out the back door of his factory onto the ground is a criminal, because it's an environmental crime.
Is that white-collar crime?
If the guy does it, absolutely. If the guy responsible for doing it, who gives the orders, wears a white collar, it's called white-collar crime.
And what about the bank teller who steals the $5,000? Is she a white-collar criminal, you think?
No, that's just straight embezzlement.
Straight embezzlement.
The white-collar crime would be the executive that did it. But I have to disagree a little bit. I think the increase in white-collar crime is because of the increase in the money supply and the ease in which people can put their hands on millions and millions of dollars.
And you think that's just because of high technology existing today?
Not just high tech, but the increase in money supply means there's just an incredible amount of money circulating around. Look, there was a famous author who said that there's a magic moment in time when the money is in midair. At a closing, in every transaction, the money is in midair. That's when the accountants and the lawyers, the appraisers and the brokers all take their slice out.
That's a terrific term. I've never heard that before.
The result of the increase in technology and being able to wire transfer billions of dollars instantaneously around the world means that there's more money in midair longer, and therefore more people can get at it. Not just the legitimate servicers of accountants, lawyers, CPAs, and brokers, but also that guy who can manipulate a computer and divert a little bit of that stream into his pocket instead of where it should go.
A computer, I read about these two fellas who put a money machine in the middle of a mall. And people kept using the money machine. They put their money card in, plugged in their personal identification number. Machine went blank. They couldn't get any money out. It said, sorry, out of order. They took their card back and they left. 2 months later, the machine was removed. And evidently, these white-collar criminals replaced or redid all of the individuals' cards, took them to their own money machines, put them in the machines, plugged in the individual's personal identification number, which they were able to extract from the time that the real individuals put their money in, and were able to steal hundreds and thousands of dollars. They got caught because the camera was there on the money machine taking pictures of their faces. Do people get caught because they're dumb?
Many do. Some of them really just do it until they do get caught. Eddie Antar is a good example. He knew what he was doing. He knew that it was getting worse and worse, but it seemed so easy, and he felt so good about outsmarting all these high-priced people that he just kept on doing it.
It's a crazy Eddie story.
Yeah.
Right? He was just insane.
Literally.
Do you think that people are anxious to outwit their employers or their stockholders or their banks or their insurance companies? Is it a game? Has it become exciting? What do you think?
To some people it is, sure.
Yeah.
I think the great majority of the American people are not. And I remain confident and hopeful that we're not going to be a nation taken over by criminals and white-collar criminals and people stealing. I just don't think, because if we are, we're dead and through, and our country's not going to amount to a damn. But
we have about 20 seconds left. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Ed?
Well, the one thing I guess I would say is that today's barbarian, the one that used to be with the loincloth and the club, today wears a Brooks Brothers suit and a gold Rolex. Yeah. They are the people that commit the crimes. And I have to agree with Al that the majority of people are honest, they are hardworking, they try to make things work, but there's still more people out there all the time, and they're getting younger all the time, that do commit white-collar crime.
Al, 10 seconds. What do you have to end with for tonight's program?
I wish it were otherwise, Sam, but I'm afraid that crime and white-collar crime is going to be with us, and the more we put money in midair and make it easier to make that great circle around the world instantaneously, the more people are going to get at it.
And as long as people lie, cheat, and steal, we all have a job.
Well, Ed, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Al, thanks for joining me on White Collar Crime Report. Tonight, this is Sam Rosenthal, White Collar Crime Report. Now watch it, or the greed will get you too.
Memories with moments to remember.
April love can't get used to losing you.
When I fall in love,
we will have these moments to remember.
only love can break the heart.
Love is a many splendid thing. Chances are.
Don't let the moments of your life fade away. Bring them back with Moments to Remember. 3 records or 2 cassettes, only $19.95. 2 CDs, only $24.95. Here's how to order.
To order Moments to Remember, call 1-800-581-7600 or send $19.95 for 3 records or 2 cassettes or $24.95 for 2 CDs plus $4.95 shipping to Moments to Remember, P.O. Box 1144-GC, Monument, Colorado.
Hi, this is Sam Rosenthal for the White Collar Crime Report. With me tonight are two of New Jersey's most prominent criminal trial attorneys, Michael Gritchley, lawyer of West Orange, New Jersey, and Larry Horn, senior tax and white collar crime partner of Newark's Sills Cummins. Michael, tell us a little bit about your law practice and how you got started.
How I got started, it's ironic, Sam, that I would be here talking to you tonight about law. I grew up just 2 blocks from where this is being filmed, right on Sussex Avenue on DeRee Street.
In Newark?
In Newark, just 2 blocks away. And a lot of memories come back to me when I come back here. But I've been an attorney now since 1973. Prior to going to law school, I worked as a roofer. My family were all roofers, a sheriff's officer. And then I was an assistant prosecutor, assistant counsel to Governor Byrne.
Were you a lawyer as a sheriff's officer?
No, I was assigned to courts, and I worked various sections of the courthouse. But I sat in and watched a lot of trials. I spent 5 years just watching trials. And I was captivated by the experience. There's nothing else I wanted to do once I saw it being done. And I went to law school nights, I went to college nights, and I started a law practice. Started trying a few cases, a few more cases, and before I knew it, I'm here before you talking about my law career.
Larry, tell us about your practice.
Well, I was on the more traditional track of going to college right outside of high school. I grew up in Nutley, then went to law school. And I was extremely fortunate that a year after I got out of law school, I was offered a job as an assistant United States attorney, which is a very fancy name for a federal prosecutor, and had the good fortune to work under the tutelage of Herb Stern and John Goldstein. And for 7 years, I prosecuted virtually every federal crime that there was, but most importantly, the last 3 years, I did nothing but prosecute income tax evasion cases and income tax cases. Any criminal tax case that came into New Jersey, I was in charge of.
What other kind of crimes does the U.S. prosecutor prosecute?
Well, every federal crime in the book, and I guess you could divide the crimes into the office. You have your general crimes, which are your counterfeiting and your narcotics and your bank robbery and your weapons cases. You have your frauds cases, your scams, your bank frauds, your securities frauds, your insider trading cases.
How did you choose the tax and fraud crimes?
Well, I was very fortunate. At about the time, and this goes back to about 1975, all the tax cases in the office were being assigned at random to a number of different assistants, and no one was building up the expertise that was really necessary to deal with the skilled defense lawyers who were representing, let's say, the wealthier clients. So John Goldstein decided one day to give me the honor of centralizing all the cases with me and developing an expertise, and it happened. And
what kind of cases are you defending, Michael?
Defending everything. That's the beauty of trial work. You could, on any given day, represent someone who's accused of murder, represent a public official who's accused of some corruption, represent a businessman who's involved in stock manipulation, or as Larry indicated, some sort of tax fraud. Covers the whole gamut.
Is it different defending a violent criminal as opposed to a white-collar criminal?
I think it's different.
In what way? Is the client different? Let's start with that.
Well, not necessarily. Crime is generic, and murder applies to all segments of society, but the emotions are different in trying a violent crimes case as opposed to a fraud case or a paper case.
What causes, what prompts people to commit these crimes?
Well, basically greed.
Greed.
Greed is the great equalizer, and there is a temptation in some to pocket a little bit for themselves in addition to sharing with Uncle Sam in the state of New Jersey. And there are many means by which individuals and companies either divert receipts or generate cash or don't report things. Or interestingly enough, there are thousands of people every year who don't file returns. Recently, I've represented a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, a businessman for successive years of failing to file tax returns.
Shocking.
It's shocking.
People don't file.
But that's one that you really doesn't make sense. You can understand tax evasion because there is the greed factor. The failure to file cases truly don't make sense, and they usually don't make sense. And there is usually, I think, and I don't think I'm overgeneralizing, some reason why someone doesn't file for a number of years that goes into someone's psyche or background, because it just doesn't make sense.
What makes one attorney different from another?
Well, you make a point. I guess there's three considerations I tell clients when they come into an attorney. You go to an attorney because they're knowledgeable, which basically every attorney is. You go to an attorney because they have experience, which most attorneys do have. But that pivot, which makes one attorney different from another attorney, is judgment and preparation.
How should a client go about choosing an attorney? If somebody's involved in a crime, one of our viewers has been accused of a crime, how should he go about selecting his attorney?
He should contact another attorney who has had some experience and could make a judgment. I tell people when I give some talks.
Contact another attorney and ask for a referral?
Yeah, I give an example. You know, I may want some carpentry work done in my house, and a carpenter could come to my house, do a good job, or do a bad job. I really would not know the difference. But another carpenter would tell me, it's not correct in this corner, the walls are not straight, this type of surface is not proper. Same thing with an attorney. Sometimes you see attorneys in a courtroom, they try cases on the seat of their pants, they use cliches for legal principles, and other attorneys know if they're doing a good job or not doing a good job. Often, the public is not in a position to make an assessment as to whether one attorney is or is not the best
That's good
attorney.
advice. Get another attorney's referral.
Not only that, Sam, all attorneys are different, and when you get into an age of what we are in of specialization, oftentimes a client will come to me who's being investigated for income tax evasion and said, but if I retain you, won't the IRS think there's something wrong because I've gone to a specialist in this area? There are two questions. One, would you like your real estate lawyer to handle a significant criminal case? Or better yet, if you have a brain tumor, do you go to a podiatrist or do you go to a neurosurgeon? And you have to bring the potential client in to show, and you depend upon, I agree with Michael 100%, you go to other knowledgeable people and say, this is the problem. Who would you recommend with this area?
And we do that with each other. I often call up Larry for recommendations, either in this state or other states, who he recommends in his area, because he's the person I would go to.
And I refer cases to Michael, and Michael refers cases to me where he thinks there is a certain...
It's all incestuous.
No, it's not incestuous, because there are certain calls that I get, and I know that Michael, in certain types of cases in Essex County or Passaic County or Bergen County, that he is better suited and has more experience in that area, and I would prefer that he handle that client's problems. And then
we've all heard phrases in white-collar crime, money laundering, insider trading, tax fraud. What do some of those things mean? What is money laundering?
Money laundering is the second half of the problem. The first half of money laundering is the illegal act by which the individual obtains money, whether by theft, by stock fraud, by false pretenses, by bank fraud. It's extortion. It's the utilization of the proceeds, the depositing, the purchasing other things, the investing. It's the second half of the equation. That basically is what money laundering is.
And what is insider trading or insider information or secret information?
Non-public. Material, it sounds trite, but material, non-public
Why is that
information.
a crime? Why is this client that you spoke about being accused of stock manipulation?
Well, what they try to do is they try to keep the stock industry on a level playing field so that everybody would have an equal opportunity to make money or lose money, and they feel that the playing field is not level when certain people are able to make decisions based upon information that everyone else does not have.
Well, certainly there are people who know more about one company than another. Why is that a crime?
Mike, let me with Sam. Just because the government, and this is important for the viewers to realize, just because the government accuses someone of insider trading doesn't mean that that person is guilty of insider trading or manipulation. And to tell a war story, I tried a case last year in the federal court in Manhattan where I represented an accountant who was accused of insider trading in a major stock acquisition by Grand Metropolitan of Pillsbury back in 1988. And we were able to show that Dan Dorfman, a commentator like you, had predicted this takeover well before my client purchased, and that Donald Trump took a major position, and there was a lot of publicity about his position. And we were able to, although we didn't have the burden of proof, we were defending the case, were able to show to the jury that information about this potential acquisition was out there, and hence it wasn't insider trading.
Is the government overreaching?
In what areas?
Well, in the areas of insider trading or in the areas of tax fraud or political crimes. Are they...
Well, I don't know if they're overreaching. It's certainly, there are certain areas where government places its focus more deeply than in other areas. And right now, if you say, where is government putting its searchlight. It's putting its searchlight on healthcare fraud. Certainly always keeping its searchlight on political corruption. But in terms of overreaching, no.
You don't think so? What did Leona Helmsley do? What made that case so popular? Was it?
The reason why the Leona Helmsley case was so important to the government and the IRS is that it publicized broadly how important it is for people to file accurate tax returns. They could actually see, feel, and touch a real live person who committed a crime. Basically, through her hotel corporations, she had work done at her mansion in Connecticut and had the company pay for it, yet it wasn't a company expense, it was a personal expense. So she got the benefit of the company paying money to contractors and builders. She didn't pay for it, the company did, yet she wasn't taxed on those funds. And that's basically what it was.
So it wasn't illegal that the company paid, it was illegal that the company deducted those payments?
Well, when you combine that with telling the contractors, don't bill it to me, Leona Helmsley, but bill it to the company, and have a false purchase order made up as to what the funds were used for, that's where you begin the illegal activity, which bypassed the tax books.
Is political corruption more systemic today, you think?
No. No, I think human nature is human nature. I think what happens is that sometimes government focuses in on certain individuals, and the focus could last for 6 months, or last for a year, could last for 18 months. And if government focuses on anyone, if government ever focuses on you or me, and they spend 18 to 24 months on you, you have a problem.
When you say focus, you mean do their investigation into wrongdoing?
They do all the assets search. They have investigators, they have subpoenas, they have immunity. They can spend as much time as they want. They have a lot of laws, a lot of jurisdiction, and when you put all those together, the individual is hard-pressed to match those assets.
Are tax crimes on the rise, Larry?
I think there is a tremendous amount. From what I see in the cases that I'm retained, the IRS has not begun to scratch the surface, and one of the problems that the IRS has, unfortunately, is that it has to use too many of its resources into the narcotics field and into organized crime, which have their own investigative services, and I think the resources of the IRS are being depleted from what we would call white-collar crime or business crime because of what Congress wants it to do, because it's a significant and a very good investigative agency.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back soon with Michael Gritchley and Larry Horn on the White Collar Crime Report.
In the beginning, there was just science.
So we added a pitch-dark touch tunnel.
A saltwater beach. Incredible laser displays.
An insect zoo.
A real indie race car.
A make-your-own music studio.
The biggest OmniMax movie screen in the world.
As well as tons of hands-on exhibits on technology,
health,
and the environment.
Then we put it all in this huge building at Liberty State Park, just next door to the Statue of Liberty.
Liberty Science Center. It's where science equals fun.
Hi, this is Sam Rosenthal for the White Collar Crime Report. Welcome back. With me tonight discussing white-collar crimes, political crimes, and extortion are two of New Jersey's most prominent criminal trial attorneys, Michael Gritchley and Larry Horn. Just before the break, we were talking about tax crimes on the rise, political crimes, are they on the rise? What makes these politicians create and conduct these criminal activities? What do you think, Michael?
What makes them? That assumes that they've done it. Human nature.
Well, some have been convicted recently.
Some have been convicted. I recently was involved in a highly profiled indictment of the county executive. He was convicted, and that's where I disagree with someone who was accused of wrongdoing, but in fact he committed wrongdoing. But human nature being what it is, I guess the capacity for greed is ever present, and that's what the U.S. Attorney's Office and the various prosecutors serve as a checkoff on that greed.
Do you think politicians have too much power in this country? Is that what's fueling a lot of this greed?
I don't think so. If you look at what was going on in 1971 and 1972 with the trial of the Hudson County machine and J.V. Kenney and the prosecution of Hugh Adnesio in Newark, and now that you see investigations which are almost mirror images, but just different people in the same positions, I think occasionally you will get an abuse of office. And when you get an abusive office and you get a talented prosecutor, you put the two together, and if you invest the time, you're going to get indictments and most likely convictions.
Michael, you were portrayed in a book called The Boys from New Jersey, written by Robert Rudolph, about a long, long trial of alleged organized crime figures. Tell us about that book and your involvement.
Well, it was a trial conducted before Judge Ackerman. I think it started in terms of jury selection November of 1986, and it ended with a verdict in August of 1988. 20-some-odd individuals were accused by government with involving themselves in a RICO racketeering enterprise, which included many, many we call predicate offenses.
Took the government 2 years to try to prove a case.
Well, what happened is, I think we all learned something. We all learned that a courtroom is not a legislative body, and when you have a proceeding that requires 70 people every day to start, you know that's going to be difficult to control. And in that case, when you consider the judge, the jury, the staff, the defense attorneys, and the defendants, if you wanted everybody present every day, you needed 70 people. And that's going to be kind of difficult. It's been my experience, when you have long trials, the first 2 or 3 months, there's really no problem. You have the everyday problems. But after about 4 or 5 months, if you're on trial beyond that, life takes over. And when life takes over, it's unpredictable.
What was the outcome of this trial?
Well, the outcome was acquittals on all counts.
All acquittal?
Yes.
That's terrific. That's a feather in your cap.
Well, it was an enjoyable trial. It was enjoyable in the sense that I guess I was designated lead defense attorney and had an opportunity to put together a group of defense attorneys who I think were excellent, to master what we call an art of cross-examination, to put together a summation, and the result was successful.
How are these alleged members of organized crime different from ordinary folk? How are they?
Well, it's very difficult to represent someone who's charged with organized criminal activity. Difficult because there's nothing easy. Often you represent, for example, someone who's a white-collar criminal, and he or she is arrested, and bail is set. And you go down to a court, bail is set, and you go home and you start getting ready. When you represent an organized crime figure, bail is not set. Generally, they're detained, and you're involved in pre-trial detention hearings trying to get bail set. Often, bail is denied, and you're trying to represent and defend somebody from MCC, which is the federal holding cell over in Manhattan.
What is MCC?
Manhattan Correctional Center. And what you do is you try to get prepared to try a case. It takes you an hour to get up to see your client. It takes you an hour to get down from seeing your client. And in between, you're supposed to prepare a defense.
This is the paperwork process of going to the center, signing in, waiting for someone to come down, getting in an elevator, going up, then having your client brought to you from his cell into the witness room. It's extremely time-consuming, time-wasting, and really counterproductive.
How would you define white-collar crime? People define it very differently. What do you think of it as?
I refer to it as business, as what I would say business crime, because you're dealing with money. They used to say it's with a pen rather than a gun. I'm not too big on that. But I think I really think it's business crime, because I look upon it as tax fraud, political corruption, bank fraud, securities fraud, commercial bribery, kickbacks, in business-type relationships.
What are some of your favorite cases? And favorite clients, both.
Well, I think rather than favorite cases, I think the way cases begin are interesting in that I have found that there is a compulsive need of people who either steal or cheat to keep a record of what they steal or cheat.
They want to keep track. They want to see how well they've done.
And how well they're doing. And these people also love to share this information with other people. And then they have falling out with these other people. I have had mothers turn in sons. I've had sons turn in fathers. I've had girlfriends turn in boyfriends. I've had nurses turn in doctors. And it goes on and on and on, because there are
most of these develop with somebody pointing a finger at somebody else?
Jealousy, vengeance, competitive advantage, people being jilted, not feeling that they're being rewarded for the type of work that they do. You've been a bookkeeper. When a person when a person commits tax fraud, and the bookkeeper is aware of it, that person is gaining a partner for life. You can't fire that person, Sam, because once you fire that person or replace that person knows something that you don't want anybody else to know about.
Does a cash economy contribute to these crimes?
Well, interestingly enough, the government has made tremendous strides in the last 5 years in tightening up on cash. But it's the big cash. It's the drug dealers' cash that's been mainly tied up. There is still...
How have they done that? What have they done?
Well, it's basically due to the currency reporting laws and the money laundering laws. But with check cashing agencies in every major city, with businesses cashing checks for reasons of either cash payroll, for commercial bribery, for kickbacks, or just to put in the pocket, there's a lot of money still to go around. And that's where it is. It's in cash.
Michael, tell us about the book, The Jury. What is that about?
Stephen Adler, who's the law editor for the Wall Street Journal, did a survey of approximately 8 or 9 trials around the country to determine whether, in his opinion, the jury system is working or it's not working. I disagree with his results. He concluded that the jury system is not working and it needs major overhaul. I had represented a law enforcement officer, a Newark police officer, who was accused of committing a murder in Morris County when he walked in and was involved in an incident with his former wife's boyfriend. There was a struggle. The boyfriend was shot, died. My client was tried. Our position was that we did not intentionally murder anyone, that there was an incident, there was a struggle, and in the course of the struggle, the firearm was accidentally discharged. The bullet went into the decedent's body, and he died 2 days later.
And how was that reported in the jury?
Well, what he did is he examined it. He looked at the newspaper accounts, he looked at the transcripts, talked to the jurors, and he said on its face it was a case that was kind of difficult to defend, because when you look at it, you have an individual in bed, naked, my client coming in with
And he
a gun.
concluded that your client should have been convicted?
He concluded...
Was that his conclusion?
I gather that's what he concluded.
And based on that, he said the jury system doesn't work.
Well, he looked at Anil Margolis, and he was concerned about that case. He looked at a capital murder case in North Carolina. He looked at a commercial case in Texas, and said basically, under certain circumstances, he has difficulty seeing the jury system working.
Well, we saw what happened in the Rodney King case and the Reginald Denny case, and Menendez case. Does the jury system work? Well, what do you think?
We have become so politicized that I think the last few years you almost have to throw out some of these very, very high publicized cases, because agendas now are taking over, allowing a jury to decide the facts as presented in a courtroom.
How can we change the jury system to make it more fair, to make the results more equitable?
Well, see, fairness depends upon, when you politicize a case, if your side wins, then the jury is fair. If your side loses, the jury isn't fair. So I don't know whether fairness is a role.
What role do the attorneys have in determining the outcome of the case?
Well, they have a great deal to do with it. They have to make certain that hopefully the system does work. The jury is a cross-section of the community that's going to sit in judgment, and what you try to do is you try to, whatever way you can,
Is the system fair? We have criminals accused of crimes who have the advantage of retaining, engaging the most prominent defense attorneys that money can buy, a la O.J. Simpson, a la Sal Wackler, a la Leona Helmsley, a la organized crime, a la tax fraud defendants. The government, on the other hand, are they forced to use prosecutors from public service, public servants? They don't have the advantage of going out to the community.
Well, the government has unlimited resources. When they decide this is a case that's going to be investigated, they pull out as many agents as they feel appropriate, especially if it's a visible case.
But all those agents aren't in the courtroom. It's Michael Gritchley versus the government's attorney.
You missed the point. Michael raised it earlier. Preparation, preparation, preparation. You win your cases. The government wins its cases. The defense wins its cases from long hours of preparation.
But the jury is influenced by the trial.
But Sam, in the two cases you just referred to, you referred to Sal Wackler and you referred to Leona Helmsley. Sal Wackler was the chief judge of New York. He entered a plea, went to jail. His career was destroyed. So, I mean, did the system work? He was taken down if he did something wrong. Leona Helmsley, one of the richest women in the world. She did time at the age of 74.
So does it make a difference who the attorneys are, what the crime is, what station in life you are?
It does make a difference. It doesn't make a difference in who the individual attorney is, whether it's Michael Gritchley or Larry Horn. It makes a difference if you have an attorney who's dedicated to his or her profession to make certain that he or she does everything that has to be done to make certain that the system works. And that, I echo again what I said before, preparation, judgment, and skill.
Is there a large underground economy you think?
Yes.
There is?
Yes.
And will foreign bank accounts, can foreign bank accounts somehow escape taxation?
Foreign bank accounts can escape taxation, but I think foreign bank accounts are limited to that major narcotic type conspiracy with the money going out of here into Colombia and other places. I think the underground economy on a regular basis is here even without your drug problem, which is a whole nother area.
What is one of your most interesting matters where an individual was accused of tax fraud? Tell us what it was that he was accused of, what he did, how he got caught. You alluded to the bookkeeper or the accountant or the friend or the jealous individual.
Well, I remember both prosecuting and defending cases where in the days before medical reimbursements, people used to pay doctors with checks and with cash. And I can remember a number of cases that parallel each other where a dentist had a trusted bookkeeper. And the dentist would say the checks go in the bank and the cash goes in the drawer, and every Friday the cash went in the dentist's pocket. And there came a time where there was a falling out between the dentist and his nurse/bookkeeper. And she kept the record. And she walked it straight into the Internal Revenue Service. And these are the types of cases you see it with business partners who have falling outs, and the personal vengeance against each other just raises to such a level that it just doesn't get taken care of.
Some of the political crimes that you've defended, what prompted the investigation? Was it informants?
Often informants, that's the broad categorization, and there's different types of people. There are people who are upset, employees, political opponents. When you're a public figure, you are a target, and when you're a target for anyone and everyone. And people get even in many different ways, and sometimes they get even by, quote, calling the cops on you.
Greed seems to be prevalent in this country. Watch it. Don't let the greed get you. This is Sam Rosenfarb for the White Collar Crime Report. Any questions or comments, please write to me, Sam Rosenfarb, 75 Livingston Avenue, Roseland, New Jersey. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Jersey.
Precious memories of teen angels.
I've always liked to sing. Don Knotts, Barney Fife, and I used to sing on the old Andy Griffith show, often hymns. I even sang on that lawyer show, Matlock, but never like this, with some of the finest singers and musicians in the world.
Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? I will cling to the old rugged.
The first solo I ever sang in church was Sweet Hour of Prayer. I was 15. My family was proud. And now I'm proud. I get a chance to sing it again for you and your family.
I love to tell the story, will be my theme.
There are 33 beautiful old-time hymns on this album, and they are precious memories, with hope and inspiration for today and tomorrow. These are songs I've known all my life, precious memories. I hope you'll let me and all of us on our album share them with you.
To order, call 1-800-932-1200, 1-800-932-1200, or mail 1298 for 2 records or 2 cassettes, $16.98 for long play CD to Andy Griffith, 320 Main Street, Department 71, Northport, New York, 11768. No recordings you've ever owned will enrich your life like these 33 Andy Griffith favorites. Call now, 1-800-932-1200.
Join Christopher Naughton on Law Journal every Tuesday at 8 p.m. as he brings the law home to you, only on CTN.
Recognized forensic accountant, Sam Rosenfarb.
Have you ever thought of fudging a number on your tax return? Have you filed a tax return and worried about a tax audit? Have you worried about the IRS? Have you ever cheated on your return or know someone that has? If you said yes, then don't change the channel. You need to watch this episode of White Collar Crime Report. Taxes are all about money, and nobody knows more about money than accountants. Hi, I'm Sam Rosenfarb. I'm a CPA and a forensic accountant, and you're watching White Collar Crime Report. With me today are two of New Jersey's eminent white-collar crime attorneys who'll intrigue you with stories of tax fraud and their consequences. Both of these gentlemen are partners who practice corporate and tax litigation at Hannock Weissman, one of New Jersey's largest law firms. Eric Breslin is a former clerk for the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of New Jersey, and Ted Margolis is a former United States Attorney for New Jersey. He was also awarded the Department of Justice Award as an outstanding Assistant U.S. Attorney. Ted, how'd you get into the business of tax fraud?
Well, Sam, I was minding my own business at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and
here in New Jersey?
Here in New Jersey, and we had a real problem, and the problem was an interesting one. We were having a lot of IRS agents who were taking payoffs. I got assigned to those cases.
Payoffs from taxpayers?
Yes, sir.
Gee, shocking.
Yeah, and in those days, of course, our electronic equipment didn't work as well as it does today, so the major problem in those prosecutions was making sure the wires worked. But we were able to clean out the IRS pretty effectively, both in New York and here in New Jersey. Since then, we've spent a lot of time working on taxpayer cases.
We being the firm?
Yes, Hannock Weissman.
When did you leave the U.S. Attorney's Office? When was that?
Oh, now we're talking real history, Sam. It goes back to the early 1970s.
But that's what started you in the field of tax fraud?
Yes.
Great. Eric, how did you begin thinking about criminal tax or civil tax litigation?
Well, I always was interested in criminal defense, and criminal tax cases tend to be the most interesting, the most challenging, and the most fun to win. Generally, you're dealing with clients that it's much easier to feel sympathy for than some other people charged with criminal offenses.
Because they've absconded or reduced some payment to the federal government, which we'd all like to do sometime, I guess.
Because it's not that easy to put yourselves in their shoes if you're a taxpayer and if you have to fill out your own returns. I think unlike most criminals, a lot of people who commit tax crimes are in all other respects honest, God-fearing, trustworthy, and generally nice people who occasionally make grave errors of judgment. Sometimes these errors that have terrible consequences.
What kind of tax crimes do these people commit, Ted? What's a tax crime?
You know, Sam, I always think about the guy who came to our office, and he had received a notice from the IRS that he was about to be audited. And usually we get folks who are really concerned about those audits when they come in, and we met with him. And he told us that he had a business, and he was getting a lot of cash, but he had the cash hidden, and he was concerned that when he showed up for the audit, the IRS might ask him about it. He wanted to know what to do.
There's nothing illegal about getting cash in a business, right?
No, unfortunately, he hadn't been, sharing that cash with the United States of America.
Right.
Well, he came in and he convinced me, after talking with him for a while, that he was absolutely safe because he said he had the money hidden and no one would ever find it. I took a piece of paper and I wrote something on the piece of paper. I handed it to him and I said, now look, I used to be at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and this would be my guess where the money is. The guy opens the paper, looks at it, and he jumps up. It's a true story. He says, I'll be back later, and he runs out of our office, and he comes back a couple of hours later, and he says to me, now where do you think it is?
Where did you write it was hidden?
Well, it's a fairly obvious kind of a thing. I asked the guy where his bank was. Anybody walking around with a lot of cash doesn't particularly want to walk around with it for a long time.
Sure, so it's safe.
Yeah, it's in a safety deposit box in the same bank.
Right, of course.
People have to understand that the Internal Revenue Service has been in the business of finding all of the little tricks that people play, and they've been doing this for years and years and years. So they know all the tricks. There are no new ones.
And is putting cash in a safe deposit box a good idea, Eric, in avoiding tax?
Well, if it's legitimate income and if it's been properly accounted for, there's no problem in having a safety deposit box.
And there's nothing illegal about accumulating currency in a safe deposit box?
Absolutely not. It's legal tender, Sam. That's what it says on the bills, and that's what it's designed to be made for.
So long as you've paid your proper taxes.
So long as you declare it properly on your income tax return. So long as, of course, the cash is generated by a legal activity. If we're talking about drug dealers or something like that, it's a whole separate question. But as long as you account for it properly and give Uncle Sam his share of the proceeds, there's nothing wrong with the safety deposit box. Is
illegal income, like drug dealing income, also subject to tax?
It absolutely is.
It is.
And that has been a little glitch in the law that the IRS has used to great advantage on many times. Gambling proceeds, anything, I mean, drug proceeds, any proceeds due to illegal conduct is still taxable. Unfortunately, most criminals don't bother to put it down on their tax return.
What's the difference between evade tax and avoid tax?
Well, you know, in our society, you have to understand that we're talking major business here, Sam. According to the House Committee, every year under our voluntary tax payment plan in this country, we forget to pay about $400 billion a year.
$400 billion?
$400 billion. You know,
that's 400 with how many 9 zeros after it? That's a lot of zeros.
Right. In fact, if you want to let me run for president, I will guarantee that I will close the budget deficit and pay for every kind of entitlement program we have. All I need is for everybody to pay their fair share of taxes, according to the IRS code.
So they suspect that that $400 billion of taxes are not collected from tax cheats.
Well, Sam, you have to put yourself in the IRS's position. They believe, the government believes, that a lot of people cheat on their taxes. Big, little, a couple of dollars here or there. They don't have the money or the resources to go after everybody. So what they try to do, and all of this is set forth in the IRS publications and in the Department of Justice, they try to get the most bang for the buck they can out of the prosecutions they mount. So they really only go after people that they're sure they can get. The IRS and the U.S. Attorney, both here in New Jersey and elsewhere, wins between 90 and 95% of its cases yearly. There are only about 3,000 new tax prosecutions initiated every year in the United States, and that number's been flat for a good long time. The problem is that those 3,000 people are in for a pretty rough ride.
You know, Sam, one of the reasons that we're in the tax fraud business is because we have some resources that are really important. We have probably one of the best tax departments in the state. So when Eric and I say that we do tax fraud cases, we do it always with a tax partner. And one of the things that is critical to anybody who's in trouble with the IRS...
How does the tax partner differ from the two of you? How do you make that distinction for our viewers?
I'll give you a perfect example. We had, several years ago, a case in which the IRS was really putting a full court press on someone who was a fairly famous person. And this was going to be a high publicity case.
The IRS loves those high publicity cases.
Oh, yes, they do, and they put a lot of people on it.
The Leona Helmsleys and the Crazy Eddies
Absolutely.
And the like.
Absolutely, because they understand that what they're going to do is they're going to get a lot of publicity and a lot of compliance.
Do people get afraid when they read about famous people going to jail for tax fraud? Does that influence people?
I think they do, and certainly the service believes they do. You also notice that shortly before April 15th, there tend to be a spate of indictments every year, just as people are preparing their tax return. Right. Now, when I was younger, I used to think that that was just coincidence. It's not coincidence. Every year at around tax time...
They want to scare people a little bit.
They like
to send a little reminder.
We used to line them up at the U.S. Attorney's office.
So the two of you are not tax partners at Hanek Weissman. No. Those partners do different things.
No, but let me tell you what this tax partner did, and he was brilliant in this. What he did was he reconstructed this guy's tax returns for about a 4-year period, and he demonstrated to the Internal Revenue Service that had this guy filed his tax returns pursuant to law, and only with documentation that we had, the guy would have been entitled to a refund.
Right.
Now, makes it awfully tough to go after a guy, particularly in front of a jury, and think you're going to win a case when the government is the guy who really owes the money.
Even if the guy didn't file a return?
Absolutely.
So sometimes not filing a return may be a crime, but it may not be a crime that the government's willing to prosecute.
Yeah, well, they're getting angrier now. You have to remember, and this is the critical thing, since 1987, we've had the sentencing guidelines. This means that if you get prosecuted for tax fraud, judge doesn't have discretion. He's got to put you in jail.
He has no choice anymore.
That's right.
What kind of crimes and frauds are being detected by the IRS? What are they looking for now?
Well, generally in any criminal case, the IRS investigators are going to look for what is known in the industry as badges of fraud. Fortunately for the people out there, for all of us, mistakes people make on tax returns aren't criminal. You can forget to declare income. You can even take deductions that you're not entitled to. And you're not going to go to jail if it's an honest mistake.
Well, you know, people fudge numbers here and there. You know, they cut a little bit here, they add a little bit to charities, they may add a little bit to interest. Is that a crime?
Well, you have to understand, Sam, whether it's a crime or not, the government has to look at it as to whether they can convince 12 people that a crime took place and whether they're going to be able to maintain that before a jury and whether it's worth devoting government resources to it. Really what they're looking for is hard and fast evidence of fraud. A double set of books, for example, is the classic case. Phony invoices that are doctored up, whereas let's say you had work done in somebody's home that's really billed to somebody's business.
So those of the taxpayers who fudge a little on their numbers, add a little bit here.
Sam, we had a guy who had actually devised a computer program that automatically cheated for him in his business.
What did it do?
Well, what it did was...
And is the program available?
Well, I think the program is now out of circulation.
Too bad, because our viewers would love to have that program.
Now, but the interesting part of it was that this program would automatically move some cash off to the side and run the invoices and the books so that the cash was not recognized.
One for the government, one for me.
That's right.
Two for the government, one, two for me.
Now,
one of those.
Now, the good part is you don't have to keep track so much. The bad part is that's a sophisticated device, and so when they catch you, you go away for longer.
Right. The sentencing guidelines force you to go away for longer with these sophisticated devices. Are many criminals caught with sophisticated devices to create and commit these frauds?
We find that in tax fraud, sort of a lot of people think the old-fashioned way works best. You still see people burying money in their front yard and maintaining double sets of books and doing really the crimes the way the crimes were done 20 or 30 years ago. Just going back to something you said before, Sam, I mean, nobody is advising anybody to skim a few dollars here or a few dollars there. Even if you don't get prosecuted, you still may be called to account civilly for the IRS, which can be a very, very expensive proposition.
With that note, we're going to take a short break from White Collar Crime Report and come back to talk more about sophisticated tax cheats. Thanks.
Wouldn't it be nice if everything were guaranteed like Cablevision?
Sorry to keep you waiting. Here's $20.
I'm sorry your table wasn't ready. Your dinner will be free.
It would be nice, but only Cablevision guarantees we're on time for all scheduled appointments, or you choose a $20 credit or free month of service, your choice guaranteed. Too bad everything isn't guaranteed like Cablevision.
Sorry we're late, folks. This flight will be free.
In the beginning, there was just science.
So we added a pitch-dark touch tunnel.
A saltwater beach. Incredible laser displays.
An insect zoo.
A real Indy race car.
A make-your-own-music studio.
The biggest Omnimax movie screen in the world.
As well as tons of hands-on exhibits on technology,
health,
and the environment.
Then we put it all in this huge building at Liberty State Park, just next door to the Statue of Liberty.
Liberty Science Center. It's where science equals fun.
Hi, this is Sam Rosenfarb, and this is the White Collar Crime Report. And we're talking with Eric Breslin and Ted Margolis, two of New Jersey's eminent white-collar crime attorneys from the law firm of Hannick Weissman. We're discussing tax fraud and sophisticated methods of tax fraud. Eric, what are some of the most interesting tax fraud cases you've been involved in?
Well, I've had a number, and they're all interesting, Sam. They really are. You develop a taste for this work and a commitment to it, and it gets to be almost an addiction. And the most interesting thing about it is you win the ones sometimes you think you should lose, and vice versa. Although fortunately, Ted and I don't lose too many. We had a case for a government employee. He was a relatively high-ranking member of a government agency that I won't specify, and he came to us and he brought in...
But not the IRS.
But not the IRS, fortunately, and he brought in 3 years of tax returns, 1985, 1986, 1987, and he showed us a little business card that had been left at his house by a member of the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, which are essentially the police that do the investigation for the IRS. And we looked at the returns, and this guy made about $50,000 or $60,000, which is a nice salary, but not, not a grand amount of money these days. And the returns looked absolutely clean and fine and entirely regular. And we sat with him and we said, "What's the problem?" And he said, "Well, you see in that area, in my deduction area where I deducted my parents as my dependents in 1985, 86, and 87? We said, yes. He said, well, both my parents...
And that's not unusual.
Not unusual, and very nice if you do it, by the way. I'm all in favor of helping your family. Right. Unfortunately, this man's parents died in 1967. We then said, okay.
He's been deducting dead parents.
He's been deducting dead parents for 18 years. He said, look at the returns.
Everybody's not perfect.
Everybody's not perfect. Right. He said, look at my returns.
He forgot they died. He's still in mourning.
Actually, that was part of our defense, that psychologically he was unable to accept their death.
Right. Great defense.
It worked, by the way. He said, look at my returns where it says I took an IRA contribution for $2,000. Right. I said to him, thrift is terrific. It's what makes this country great. You should do that. He said, well, I just took the deduction. I didn't actually put the money in my IRA. And finally, he said, you see where in 1986 I took a $37,000 deduction because my house burned down. It was a casualty loss. By this time, I was catching on a little bit. I said, let me guess, your house didn't burn down. And he went, right. Believe it or not, even though we were unable to factually challenge any of these three things, because they were simply what had occurred and the IRS knew about it, the man wasn't prosecuted. He had to pay the taxes back. He had to pay the taxes back with interest.
But he paid what he would have paid had he filed the returns correctly to begin with.
He paid more because the IRS assessed some rather stiff penalties against him, but he didn't go to jail.
And why didn't he go to jail?
Well, one always has to remember in investigations such as this that you're dealing with a government agency. IRS agents, no matter how skilled and experienced they are, and some of them are quite good, have a lot of other cases. You know, Sam, half the IRS's criminal investigators are assigned usually full-time to organized crime or drug investigations, which only leaves half for the rest of us.
So there's lots of discretion in prosecution.
Oh, yes.
And you had lots of discretion, Ted, when you were at the prosecutor's office, yes. I'm sure. But what about these businesses? So many small businesses today have lots of currency. You know, small restaurants, the small auto shop.
Well, here's the bad news, Sam. The wonderful world of technology is now going to catch up to these folks. The IRS, and we did a program recently with the director of the New Jersey IRS and the head of CID. And by the way,
CID is a Criminal
Investigation Division. By the way, at the end of the this talk that we were on, a panel with these fellas on, the head of CID gave out an 800 number if you wanted to turn anybody in. And I looked out in the audience, there had to be about 150 people there. Everyone took that number down.
Are there rewards for turning people in?
You better believe there are. And
did you hear that, audience? There are rewards for turning in those tax sheets.
And there's nobody the IRS likes to prosecute better than an accountant.
Yeah, I just want to say to my wife, I love you, honey. One of the things that people have got to understand is that with the advent of computers, what the IRS is now doing is something that they call modeling. They will take all of the returns, for example, of small restaurants, we'll say in Essex County. They will do all of those returns, compare all of those returns, and they pretty well know what your overhead ought to be, how much you ought to be paying in workman's comp, how much you ought to be paying for food. So now they go in and they assign the same agents to do audits on all of these restaurants. What they then do is they have a pretty good model or standard for how an honest restaurant ought to look. So now a guy
compare that to what's been filed.
Absolutely, and they run it through the computer now.
I have a friend who recently bought a car for $8,000 in cash, and he paid sales tax on $4,000. Is that a crime? Is that a sales tax crime?
Sure it is.
How does a crime like that get detected?
Well, like most other crimes, somebody turns them in. What you do is you make yourself vulnerable to other people. The guy who sold him the car, he's not doing this for the first time. And so maybe a year from now, he gets caught. And he's sitting there across from these really nice guys who tell him how long he's going to prison. And he decides that he's going to help them and give them some names of people who maybe have done the same thing or worse.
So once two people are involved, it's not a secret anymore.
See, Sam, people have a blind spot sometime about what they do and who they do it with. Most IRS cases, most federal tax prosecutions start on tips. Tips given by disenchanted wives in the course of divorces.
Does that happen often? That
quite a bit.
That divorcing spouses call up the IRS and say, "My husband's cheating on his taxes"?
I've had cases where not only that, divorcing spouses arrived unannounced at the U.S. Attorney's Office carrying with them suitcases stuffed with documentation, canceled checks, and the rest of it. Matrimonial cases are fertile ground for the IRS. Another very popular area is disenchanted employees. If you run a small business and you have a bookkeeper who knows where every penny in your business goes, and you decide one day, well, I have my windows now, I don't need her anymore, I can fire her, she can stick a knife in your back just as easy as 1, 2, 3.
So she squeals to the IRS, and you're the one that goes to the...
It's even worse than that, Sam. The last one that I had, this woman had worked at this place for 25 years.
When you say the last one you had, you mean the last case you had, right?
Yes,
okay.
the last.
I just want to clarify
yes.
that. Okay.
And she had worked at this place for 25 years. She got terminated. She waited until all of the severance had been paid. The last check cleared, she called the IRS. She sat with those guys and gave them a blueprint of
chapter and verse of what happened.
And put her divs in for the 10% reward.
Oh, that's the amount of the reward, 10%, and that's collectible.
Yeah.
Is it taxable when they get a reward?
Oh, it sure is, and I hope she declared it.
So the IRS will sometimes even act on anonymous tips if they're sufficiently meritorious and if there's somebody that they're interested in. They don't even require the person ratting you out to drive down to the federal building and show themselves. You can do it through the mail.
Well, what kind of tax crimes are usually detected by the IRS? What is it that they're catching more often than not?
Well, I mean, the big daddy that they are looking for has been and probably will be in the near future tax evasion. It's a felony. It's the most serious felony in the federal arsenal.
That's more serious than not paying your tax or cheating on some currency.
It's an affirmative lie.
Affirmative lie as opposed to
a passive lie. Yes,
neglect. Neglect, right.
It's more serious than not filing your returns. It's more serious than, for instance, filing a return that has a material false statement on it. What it requires the government to do is show a willful attempt that actually did cheat the government out of tax income.
Does it have to be a lot of tax income to go to jail, to be evasion?
The cases say more than it has to be a substantial amount. There have been some cases where a couple of $1,000s have been held not to be enough, but in this, as in so many areas, the service has tremendous discretion.
So if somebody reports...
But the key that you have to remember, and this is the part that gets people in trouble, is when they catch you, and they go back and they look at all those past years, it's not the 1 year that they catch you for. They add all of that up.
So if they add 6 years worth of $2,000 per year, now it's a $12,000 fraud.
That's right.
And so, but if somebody's reporting $50,000 of income and $15,000 a year in tax, is $2,000 a year enough to put them in jail?
It depends to some degree. I mean, it depends to some degree on who they are. The government doesn't have the resources to go after everyone in that position, and generally there's a prejudice against wage-earning, W-2 earning people that commit fraud at that relatively low level. Not to say that if the case falls into the government's lap, they won't prosecute it and take it all the way through. They will.
So there's a prejudice against the lower earning people rather than a prejudice towards against the higher earning people.
I think that most prosecutors and most IRS agents, knowing that they are operating with limited budgets and limited resources, are looking to get the most bang for their buck. And prosecuting a nurse or a fireman or someone who works in a gas station who makes $30,000 a year and who cheats on $1,000, while it's a crime as much as a rich person, there's certain levels of administrative supervision that you're going to have to justify, you know, that prosecution too, that may just eventually say, can't the civil fine, interest, penalties, and really taking a lot of this guy's money do the trick just as well?
Yeah, but they're not going to let you go, Sam. If they don't prosecute you, they're going to send you over to the civil side, and they're going to take about as much of your money as they can get their hands on.
So even if they don't put you in jail, they still want your money?
Fraud penalties, interest.
We all read a lot about Swiss bank accounts. Is that a factor in a lot of these tax fraud cases? Foreign bank accounts, Swiss bank accounts, Bermuda accounts? Does that account for a lot?
I've had two. I mean, generally your average small business guy running a dry cleaning plant in Linwood doesn't run off to Switzerland every couple of weeks to deposit money, but there are people that do keep their money overseas, and that is an additional factor that creates a lot of jeopardy, because as Ted alluded to before, using sophisticated means to cheat on your taxes gets you more jail time, and using foreign bank accounts is a classic method of what a classic example of what a sophisticated means is.
What prompts most of these tax crimes? What do you think is the cause of these crimes?
Oh, there's no question. It's greed.
Greed?
Sure.
Greed prompts most of these crimes.
People decide.
People are greedy.
That they simply don't want to pay all of that money. There was some movie star who decided that she wanted to only give the government a certain percentage of her income, and she would sit down every year with herself and decide what that percentage. And she decided
what the percent was.
That's right.
Greed. Don't let the greed get you. I don't want to cut you off, but don't let the greed get you. Time is up. This is the White Collar Crime Report. You're watching Eric Breslin and Ted Margolis. This is Sam Rosenfarb. If you want a copy of tonight's show, or you have any questions about tonight's show, write to me, Sam Rosenfarb, 75 Livingston Avenue, Roseland, New Jersey, 07068. Phone number is 201-535-1300. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Ted?
Stroud, Route 35 in Keyport, for Buicks, Pontiacs, GMC trucks.
Become the best. The Army National Guard. Americans at their best.
The average funeral today now costs over $4,000, but the most Social Security will pay to your survivors, if they qualify, is only $255, leaving your loved ones to pay the balance. If you're age 50 to 80, you can protect your loved ones with Montgomery Ward Life's Mature Life Plan. It pays cash expenses at your family's time of need.
It's important to know my wife or kids won't be burdened if anything happens to me.
I didn't have to take a physical. I didn't even have to answer any health questions.
With the Mature Life Plan, you enroll by mail and you cannot be turned down for coverage.
I feel good knowing that we're protected by Montgomery Ward Life, a company we know we can trust.
Call now and get a free booklet explaining Social Security benefits and free information about the Mature Life Plan.
For free information, call 1-800-419-5599.
Resolution on the Secretary's desk.
Insurance fraud is rampant. As much as $20 billion per year is lost to fraud, and that doesn't even include health insurance. Have you ever cheated on an insurance claim? Well, watch it. The Justice Department, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and our State Fraud Bureau is watching you. With me tonight are Carolyn Geer, senior writer for Forbes magazine, whose focus is insurance and insurance fraud. Martin Beagleman, U.S. Postal Inspector, and Richard Karris, insurance fraud investigator for Ernst & Young. Carolyn, you write about insurance and insurance-related topics. How did you get involved in that area?
Well, to be honest, it was a bit of an accident. I've been at Forbes for over 5 years now, and a little over 2 years ago, I wrote my first insurance article, and then I wrote another and another, and if you write about insurance, it inevitably leads you to writing about insurance fraud.
Right. Whenever there's insurance fraud. Exactly. Forbes, for our readers, is a business magazine.
That's right.
Right. And did you write about business before you wrote about insurance?
Yes, general business topics.
Business-related topics.
Exactly.
And insurance fraud, of course, is written about every time you talk about insurance because it's such a large problem.
It really is. And if you're an insurance reporter, and you have a pulse, you'll notice that there's quite a bit of insurance fraud going on. It's hard to avoid writing about it.
People just pad their claims, is that it?
People, yes, that's that's where it starts. Consumers, you know, bearing the deductible on a policy, padding their claims a little bit. They don't realize really that it's a crime, that it's a fraud.
Martin, you're a U.S. Postal Inspector. What does that mean?
The Postal Inspection Service is the law enforcement arm of the Postal Service. Postal inspectors investigate crimes involving the U.S. Postal Service, its employees, and involving its customers. I specifically investigate mail fraud.
So customers of the U.S. Postal Service are all of us mail recipients and mail users, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I investigate mail fraud, one particular area within the inspection service. Mail fraud is the use of the mails to commit a crime or to attempt to commit a crime, particularly an insurance fraud or other kinds of frauds. In fact,
what other kinds of frauds are there?
Oh, it could be insider trading. It could be loan scams. It could be boiler room scams. You can take any kind of fraud and make it into a mail fraud as long as the mails are used as an important part of the scheme to obtain money and other funds.
Sounds like an interesting job, Martin.
I find it very
Have you had some interesting scams?
Over the years, many kinds of different cases have come my way, and what's interesting is although it's all fraud related, each kind of fraud I see is different. I mean, a loan scam could be entirely different than an insurance fraud, and you have to learn the particular areas you're investigating so you can overcome the problems and learn the scheme and convict.
Learn the nature of the scheme, learn how to think like a criminal.
In many ways, yes, that's true.
What kind of fraud scams, tell us a little bit about an interesting scam that our viewers might find fascinating, because the imagination of some of these criminals just is staggering.
One of the most common kinds of frauds we see involving mail fraud is these telephone and postcard schemes. Almost every person, I'm sure all the viewers have received over the years, little postcards telling them congratulations, they have just won a great gift. Usually one of 5 great gifts. All they have to do is call this number and speak to someone.
I get one at home at least once a week.
Well, typically if you own a car or you're in a particular kind of business or you have a credit card or subscribe to a particular magazine, you're going to be on a mailing list, and these people buy mailing lists, they're also called sucker lists, and contact people. Well, they will send out hundreds of thousands of these postcards to people, hoping to hook someone to fall for the scheme. In fact, the old saying in these boiler rooms is you're selling the sizzle, not the steak. Because if you think about it, what they're really appealing to you is your thought process, not what you're going to get. Because typically in these scams, you get nothing or something of inferior value. But what they do is they appeal to your thought process. If you look at a steak on a grill, sizzling, it's aromatic, it's beautiful, you see the smoke rising, and your taste buds explode.
You're making me hungry, Martin.
Right. But that could be a piece of leather. It could be the worst tasting steak around, but you're not tasting it, you're thinking of it. And that's exactly what these boiler rooms do. They appeal to people's sometimes greed, but also innocence, that you think you're getting something for nothing, and really you're getting nothing for nothing. If it sounds too good to be true, well, absolutely true. If something sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true.
Richard, tell us a little bit about what you do at Ernst & Young.
I work as an insurance fraud investigator, and I look at really aspects of files. Insurance companies will come to Ernst & Young and say, we want an independent opinion of the way our claim staff is handling these files.
Ernst & Young is a large public accounting firm, management consulting firm?
That's right, and I work within the management consulting division, where we have many people like myself that are insurance fraud investigators, actuaries, and we will look at the claim file and look to see if there's red flags in the claim file. Was there some type of fraudulent activity going on? And really, we give an independent opinion as opposed to an insurance company really having the senior management review themselves.
So what kind of frauds are you uncovering in evaluating some of these claims?
Well, really across the whole gamut, both property and liability. When we talk about liability, we're talking about things with medical bills where physicians will have a claimant go to many different physicians to build up the medical claim. So their contingency fee, they would be entitled to receive a larger amount of the settlement. And with property fraud, we're talking about fires, water damage, where you often have public adjusters involved.
The insurance industry breaks down into two large areas, property casualty and health insurance. What's the difference for our viewers so that they understand?
Well, property...
And I understand, too.
Well, property casualty basically is your homeowner's insurance, your car insurance. That's sort of personal lines. It's also insurance for businesses, commercial insurance.
Like fire insurance, that would fall under property casualty.
Sure, then you've got life insurance and health insurance, and they're the second category of insurance companies.
And they're sold by different insurance companies and different agents? Well, maybe sometimes the same insurance company,
but
right. Different agents.
Usually.
Usually different agents.
They're quite different animals.
Yeah, and the fraud that we're talking about tonight, this $20 billion, is just in the property and casualty area.
That's right.
Do you also investigate insurance fraud in the health insurance area?
Yes, we do. In fact, health insurance fraud is really the in area for investigation. We find that there's a large problem. In fact, there's many different federal task force right now underway investigating healthcare fraud.
Healthcare fraud, right. Carolyn, you wrote an article, Inside Jobs. This article talks about the E. Vincent leather goods scandal, and really it describes activities performed by Martin and his bureau. And there's a quote from Richard in the article. Just tell us a little bit about that case.
This is a fascinating case, I thought, that involved a lot of work on the part of Martin's staff and the U.S. Attorney and the FBI. But basically, it uncovered a long-standing fraud scheme in the greater New York area and beyond. It really stretches from Maine to Florida, that involves corrupt public adjusters. And a public adjuster is someone a policyholder would hire to represent him or her to the insurance company if they have a claim.
Now, why would somebody need a public adjuster, Richard?
Well, many times public adjusters monitor the radio, and when a fire occurs, they're at the doorstep often before the firemen even arrive. So they'll get to the scene of a fire and tell the insured, oh, the insurance claim process is highly technical. The insurance company's not going to give you a fast settlement. You better sign up with me. And they're really taking advantage of the insured at a very, when the insured really, with the policyholder, is under distress. So often the policyholder will sign up and the public adjuster is really in their benefit to inflate a claim. Because
so the public should be wary of signing too soon with a public adjuster.
I think the public really should talk to their insurance agent and broker about the need for a public adjuster in the claim adjustment process.
In this article about this Vincent scandal, there's a quote. It says, "I've been an investigator for 21 years, and I've never seen so much pervasive fraud. So far, more than 100 defendants scattered from Maine to Florida are suspected of bilking millions out of the insurance company. In New Jersey alone, 5 people pleaded guilty to participating in a scheme to cheat Chubb." And that's a quote from you, Martin. Tell us about this scandal and how you got involved.
Well, you always find pockets of corruption and fraud in many different areas. You see it in police corruption, you see it in building inspectors, you see it in food inspectors, health inspectors. But what we found very interesting about this case is that from top to bottom, all the participants in the property claim settlement process were involved in the fraud.
Wow, so they had collusion among what you call public adjuster, the store owner, the agent.
Well, we found the scheme couldn't work unless all participants were involved, because if someone said, look, I don't want to go along with the scheme, it would end. You needed the insured to be involved, his public adjuster, you needed the company adjuster, and any other experts that the companies use to help settle claims.
And they found it easy to get this collusion among all of them?
Well, money talks.
Money talks.
And what happened, we found, is when people offered large sums of money, people making $50,000 a year, and in one shot they could make that whole salary up in a bribe, They found it very easy to say yes. And the theory we had on this case was that just like you can't eat one potato chip, you can take one bribe. And the more you took a bribe, the more times you took a bribe, the easier it became to rationalize to yourself that it's something that everybody does, therefore it's okay.
Well, what happened in this leather goods store? It did burn down, right? Or there was a
fire at the mall where the store was located, and a claim was filed for water damage, which is typical after a fire.
Sprinkler systems go off, and they completely submerge some inventory in water.
Exactly.
Right.
Only it later came out that while there was really only about $10,000 worth of damage to the store, the claim was filed for almost $100,000. You know, it involved, as Martin says, all of the parties, from the store owner to the public adjuster who was representing him.
And how was the fraud uncovered?
Well, in this case, we had a little bit of luck because one of the participants, or one of the non-participants, happened to learn about the fraud. As is the downfall of many people who involved in schemes, one of the participants bragged to his best friend that he was making a lot of money by ripping off the insurance company. And his best friend...
And he was proud that he was making a lot of money.
He was very proud, and he thought nothing wrong to brag. Unfortunately, the person he bragged to was his broker, his insurance broker, who happened to be a good guy, an honest person, who said, look, this is wrong, and told the people in the insurance company who contacted us.
Does he get a reward?
No, but he's a decent man, and he's an ethical man, and he should be known for that.
And that's reward enough?
I think so.
Let me add to that.
Yes.
Because I remember handling claims as a claims examiner. I remember a burglary. In this particular situation, there was more, the policyholder was claiming that there was more taken in the burglary than could physically be contained in the room. And the accountants came in, and it just was impossible for the amount of merchandise that the policyholder was claiming.
People just have no conscience in some cases, right? Do you find that?
We found that the people who did this normally would never think of committing crimes, robberies, burglaries, or anything else. But the reason they did this was because they felt it wasn't a crime. They knew it was wrong, but they felt it wasn't a crime, that everybody was doing it, and it was something that they had an ability to do because they paid premiums, and high premiums. And they rationalized it that this is okay to do because people do it and nobody gets caught.
Padding an insurance claim is a crime, right? People go to jail for
Absolutely.
that. Right? In your article, you talk about Richard Lewis from the Newmark and Lewis store chain. We probably all remember him from the commercials that he had. He had a $1.6 million fire damage claim, which is now bankrupt, and he pleaded guilty, and he's awaiting sentencing. He might go to jail for inflating his insurance claim. Does it have to be in the millions before people go to jail?
Absolutely not. We have prosecuted claims for as low as $8,000 to as high as $19 million. The only difference on the federal sentencing guidelines is how much time a person does based on the amount of fraud.
So somebody might go to jail for inflating an $8,000 claim?
Absolutely.
And it is a crime. I want to make that point to our viewers, that inflating your insurance claims, despite you paying premiums for a number of years, despite you never having collected a cent in recovery, is still a crime.
And it also, besides being a crime, what people don't, I think, always understand is that it raises the cost of insurance for everyone.
With that note, we'll be back after this short break.
I forgot it.
Forget it. Next time, don't forget it. And every time, make it part of the relationship.
A latex condom used consistently and correctly prevents the spread of HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, and may save your life.
Hi, this is Sam Rosenthal for the White Collar Crime Report. We're discussing insurance fraud. With me tonight are Carolyn Geer, writer for Forbes magazine, Martin Beagleman, U.S. Postal Inspector, and Richard Karris, an insurance consultant with Ernst & Young. Right before the break, we were talking about fraud and its effect on policyholders. Do policyholders pay higher premiums because of fraud? Richard?
Insurance premiums are reflective of the underlying losses. To the extent fraud is part of the losses, policyholders across the country will be paying more in every line of insurance.
So if somebody goes to their body shop after an accident and says, you know, John, you could fix my car, I have a $500 deductible, why not increase the price by $500? Get a if the cost of it is $1,000, get a $1,500 check for an insurance company, or get a $1,000 check for an insurance company after deducting my deductible. It won't cost me anything. Is that a fraud?
Yes, it is.
But people do that all the time, don't they?
Doesn't mean it's right.
It's a fraud, and people go to jail for that.
People can go to jail.
And it increases premiums.
Across the board. Insurance fraud is the second largest crime in the United States after income tax evasion, because you had mentioned $20 billion in property and casualty fraud, and that's what we're talking about here tonight. On top of that, Sam, is health insurance fraud. That's another $75 billion in itself.
$75 billion.
So it's a big industry. It's a growth industry.
That's a lot of money, even to Forbes, right? What are insurance companies doing to combat fraud? What can they do?
Well, a couple of the, many insurance companies were affected by this New York case that we've been talking about. And what some of them are doing are trying to do more re-inspections of claim sites, because what would happen would be a claim would be filed, and they would claim certain damage, and they would make it up. And if the site had been re-inspected, the second crew coming through might have caught that.
I read in the article, Martin, where you said that some of the pictures of some of the damaged goods, which is identical to pictures you received in other claims.
The reason that was is that many of the public adjusters and the company adjusters would get together and actually make up claim files, stage claims, but never leave their office. They would get together and say, okay, we're going to stage a water damage claim. Let's go through a pile of pictures which they would keep.
That's
and say,
absolutely
okay,
incredible.
Absolutely, and we found that.
So they take a great picture of a water damage claim and use it over and over again.
Exactly. And that's what we found. In fact, in many of the raids that we did and search warrants, we found boxes and boxes and drawers full of photos they would use over and over again.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible.
There were incredible claims staged and inflated in this case from people installing plumbing fixtures just so that they could break the pipes and cause water damage to...
That was the purpose of the fixtures being installed?
Exactly. Another defendant admitted that he devised a smoke-blowing machine that would blow powdered smoke around a room to make it look like there had been smoke damage.
Although there wasn't any smoke damage.
No.
And obviously, real smoke and real fire damage causes real injury and real damage. But if you just blow powdered charcoal, let's say, over something, take a photo, make it look like smoke damage, then vacuum it up, causing very little real damage, you can put claims in for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, which they did.
The insurance industry is doing something about this, and regarding the computer systems. Every time a person submits a claim to an insurance company, it goes into a computerized system, a database, where all insurance companies can subscribe and see if, let's say, John Smith submits a claim with a certain public adjuster. Let's say Joe Smith, the public adjuster, represents John. Well, if there's a combination, if there's more than one or two claims, well, that's going to come to light. So the insurance industry is beginning to take action, and it's been doing so through the use of insurance databases as well as special investigators employed by insurance companies.
Richard, you wrote an article entitled Unmasking Insurance Fraud, in which you claim that 15 to 20% of all California auto insurance claims are fraudulent. That's a staggering number, 20%. Most people are honest, aren't they?
Yeah, most people are honest. Most claims are genuine. Those statistics come from the National Insurance Crime Bureau, which is the leading independent organization for the property and casualty industry that fights insurance fraud. And they're the ones that really estimate the cost of fraud to be even closer to $30 billion if staged auto accidents are included.
What can consumers do if they know of someone committing fraud?
Consumers can call there's an 800 number through the National Insurance Crime Bureau, and it's 1-800-TEL-NICB.
National Insurance Crime Bureau, what is
NICB.
that?
The NICB is the leading U.S. investigative organization supported by the property and casualty insurance industry. More than 1,000 companies are members. And through this hotline, which is open 24 hours, I called it the other night just to check.
Yeah.
2 in the morning, an investigator is on the other end of the phone, and they'll take all the details of the information, as little or as much as a consumer has.
Let's go through these public adjusters again. Are most of the insurance scams that you investigate, do they contain, is a public adjuster one of the players?
Unfortunately, it was one of the ingredients to insurance fraud. Not to say that all public adjusters are corrupt, but unfortunately in this case, in almost every claim that we saw that was bad, the ingredient of fraud or the causation was the public adjuster.
How do these public adjusters usually get paid, Carolyn?
Well, that's one of the problems, we think, is that public adjusters are paid a percentage of the settlement that is obtained from the insurance company.
So the greater the settlement, the greater their fee.
Exactly.
We also find that besides the legal fee, quote unquote, there's also money under the table, because you need the cash to pay off the company adjusters and the other people to make the claim fly, the bad claim fly.
I see. So they're being bribed in currency, or being paid off in currency, and then using that currency to pay off adjusters.
Correct.
Well, one of the factors of insurance fraud is this contingency fee arrangement. A public adjuster is very much not unlike a negligence attorney earning their fees, which is a percentage of insurance company settlements. So the larger the settlement, the more the public adjuster is going to take, and that's legitimately.
Why does an insured need a public adjuster?
There's a perception out there that insurance companies are not out for the best interest of the insured. And many people feel that if they leave it up to the insurance company to handle the settlement, they won't get their fair and equitable settlement. So people many times, referred by brokers and others who have an interest in the claim, will say use a public adjuster to be your expert.
Carolyn, you're right about the insurance industry. And is that your experience with them, or perception of the industry, that the public needs a middleman?
Well, I would say two things. For the large commercial insured, a buyer at a large factory or huge business that burns down, I mean, you could argue that a public adjuster is necessary because it's a complicated claim, and people don't have time to deal with it necessarily themselves. But for a small homeowner claim, it's hard to make the argument that a public adjuster is necessary in most
It's not
cases.
complicated enough for another professional to be involved. His fee doesn't make sense. His fee is borne by the policyholder.
Exactly.
It's the policyholder who pays him. He's not paid by the insurance company.
No, he's paid out of the policyholder's settlement check.
If really a consumer had a problem, they really can go through their insurance agent or broker. They really don't need a third party getting involved, who's really not ever involved in the situation except at the time of the loss.
But the problem here is that most insureds don't know that there's a relationship between the broker and the PA. Typically, the broker, especially in New York, by referring the PA to the insured, will get 50% kickback of the fee without the knowledge of the insured. And unfortunately, that's legal in New York State.
It's legal for the public adjuster, you refer to the public adjuster as PA.
Yes.
It's legal for him to receive
to
pay
kickback
50% to the broker.
Yes, for the referral.
It's a referral fee.
It sounds unethical. Why is that permissible?
It's allowed under New York State law.
Without disclosure to the policyholder?
That's
right,
correct.
The policyholder may not know that that's even happened.
I have yet to find a case where the insured knew that his broker was getting a kickback for the referral. It also promotes fraud. In fact, in this case, we did indict several brokers for being part of the scam.
And one time in New York State, in the early 80s, when I used to handle claims, public adjusters were only licensed to handle fire, and they were handling all lines of property insurance. And I said that was wrong. And there was this eventually went on for many, many years, but now public adjusters can handle all lines of property insurance.
That relationship is outrageous. Carolyn, what's fueling all this greed, this fraud? What do you think it is?
I wish I knew. You know, part of it is, as we've said earlier, you know, there's a perception that it's not wrong. You know, there is also this adversarial relationship between the policyholder and the insurance company for whatever reason. And also there's the perception on the policyholder's part that I pay my premium every year and I haven't had a claim, and boy, now it's 10 years down the road and I've got a claim and I'm going to get mine back.
Carolyn, you wrote an article for Forbes entitled "The Case of the Bum Agent." Tell us about that. It's another fraud scam.
That's right. I mean, insurance fraud comes in many flavors, so you sort of have to define your terms when you talk about insurance fraud. That was a story about how a person can protect themselves from an agent who might not have the policyholder's best interests at heart.
You suggest that every policyholder write his check out to the insurance company,
right,
and not to the agent, because if you write your check to the agent's likely to take that.
That's right.
You wrote an article on art scams. in insurance fraud.
Right, that article was about, it centered on one particular policyholder who claimed that he was an antique store owner, an art dealer, and he claimed that a $1 million painting had been stolen from the car which was parked outside his antique store. And it turned out that, well, it was a very elaborate story.
He had the $1 million painting in the trunk.
But he had the $1 million painting. Yes, it was securely in his store, and that claim was not paid.
Have you ever seen a car stolen without any valuable items in the trunk? Right, that's just a rhetorical question. Martin, you get your authority to investigate claims through the Mail Fraud Act. Mail fraud as opposed to female fraud?
Well, the Mail Fraud Act and the Mail Fraud Law was enacted in 1872 in response to problems after the Civil War when scam artists would travel the country advertising merchandise or other things of value through the U.S. mail. People would send money, and these people would take off and provide neither the refund or the item ordered. And in response to that, because you really couldn't attack people or go after cases if, say, the victim was in New York and the scam artist was in California. Mail fraud allows us to prosecute and investigate these scams using federal authority and be able to prosecute wherever the crime may occur.
And you also investigate wiretapping frauds as well.
Wire fraud.
Wire frauds as well. Don King was recently indicted for insurance fraud. Right. Is that handled by your office?
We also investigate wire fraud. It's a companion statute to mail fraud. You just separate or switch the use of the mail for the use of interstate wire transfer and interstate wire lines.
Great. Insurance fraud is an interesting topic. I'm sure our viewers are interested to know that insurance fraud, padding claims, is a crime, could go to jail. Greed is incestuous, and there's a lot of greed fueling a lot of people, and don't let the greed get you. This is Sam Rosenthal for the White Collar Crime Report. Thank you for the program. I appreciate the topic. Richard?
Stroud, Route 35 in Keyport, for Buicks, Pontiacs, GMC trucks, Lincolns, and Mercuries. Over 9 acres of new cars, trucks, and vans, as well as top-quality used vehicles, all at Garden State Parkway, exit 117. For nearly 50 years, Straub has ranked among the top dealers in America for customer satisfaction. For your best deal on a new Buick, Pontiac, GMC truck, Lincoln, or Mercury, join the thousands of satisfied customers at Straub, Route 35 in Keyport.